If you've seen the movie Spotlight, and if you haven't, you should. It's not just that important, it's that good, and not at all graphic. It stays at a very high level in terms of the Catholic sex abuse crisis. Basically Spotlight talks more about how the crisis was uncovered and not exactly what happened to the survivors. You should watch Spotlight. And one question the movie Spotlight will provoke is this: what happened next? And what was it like? And how did it feel to be one of the people whose story was told in Spotlight, one of the people whose lives was impacted, shaped, destroyed, dramatically impacted by the movie Spotlight and the release of the articles in January 2002 whose creation the movie Spotlight chronicles. My name is Chris O'Leary, and I'm a survivor of the Catholic sex abuse crisis. In the late 1970s and early 80s, here at the Church of the Immaculata, I was sexually exploited, abused, and assaulted, ultimately raped by a priest named Father Leroy Valentine. Abuse that was witnessed, at least in part, by a priest, a man who I first came to know as Father, and who you likely know as Cardinal Timothy Dolan. Cardinal Timothy Dolan lived and worked with my abuser, Father Leroy Valentine, here at Immaculata for 2 years, from the summer of 1977 to the summer of 1979. Father Dolan first came here in the summer of 1976, and then Father Valentine came here in the summer of 1977. I remember, Father Dolan's the first priest that I remember teaching us during our religion class in third grade, Mark 8:22 through 26. Jesus heals the blind man at Bethsaida. It's the one where he has to do it twice. He spits on the ground and puts the mud on the guy's face and ends up having to do it twice. The reason I remember that story of the blind man at Bethsaida is that then Father, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan, chose me to play the role of Jesus Christ, which any Catholic or Christian will know is a pretty big deal. The next summer, probably June of 1977, a priest named Father Leroy Valentine came to Immaculata. Father V, as we called him, who we all liked. Father V was very different than the other priests. He was much more relaxed, much more casual, much more friendly, much more approachable. And Father Valentine was a pedophile. The problem, I tell my story otherwise. Let me just talk about Spotlight and Father Dolan. The problem is that Father Leroy Valentine made very little effort to hide what he was doing to me and to us from the other priests, from Monsignor Flavin and from then Father and now Cardinal Timothy Dolan. The abuse started here in the church, back in the cry room, continued on. This side is the priest side of the sacristy. This side is the altar boy side of the sacristy. And then, my abuse started back during face-to-face confession in basically the back of this church, the Church of the Immaculata, in one of the cry rooms, where they would put 2 chairs, and it would be you and Father Valentine in a room with the curtains drawn, and Father Valentine would just put his hands all over you, under the guise of comforting you and everything. Now, I don't know that Father Dolan or Monsignor Flavin knew about that. I do know that, so here is just past on the other side of the rectory. So this is the rectory here behind me. Just beyond it is the gym, the Immaculata gym. Well, let's walk over there. Mass is going on, so I don't think I'll get busted or yelled at for being over here. So in the summer of 1977, and I've had other people tell me the story. Well, so you can see that neighborhood there, that house. There's a whole neighborhood back there that kind of wraps around Immaculata. Father Leroy Valentine showed up in the summer of 1977 and then started hanging out with the people back in that neighborhood. When the boys of the neighborhood would swim, Father Valentine would be there watching them. When the boys in the neighborhood would play Dungeons and Dragons in guys' basements, Father Valentine would be there watching them. And that's one of the worst things about this, is that those moms knew what was going on. They talked to each other, they told each other. Nobody told my mom, nobody told me. To continue the story I told earlier, so this is the gym. Used to be the church at Immaculata, then they built the new church. So back in the day, I don't know, maybe they still do, the after-school program was held there in the gym at Immaculata. And Mrs. Glarner, who ran the after-school program here at Immaculata, here's the school right there. Mrs. Glarner, and this is like right now, the same time of year at the start of the school, within a week or so, I believe, of school starting at Immaculata in August of 1977, Mrs. Glarner went to Sister Helen and said, "We got a problem with this Father Valentine guy. This Father Valentine guy is messed up. His behavior with and around the children was inappropriate. The way he dressed with the children was inappropriate. He wore these tight shorts and bulges and everything. And then worse, and to the story of my abuse, Father Valentine liked to wrestle with the kids, which is basically how he got his hands on the kids, how he tested and groomed the kids was via wrestling." Long story short, Sister Helen went to Monsignor Flavin, our pastor. There's the rectory right there. Monsignor Flavin told her to never tell anyone what happened. You know, when I started trying to understand what happened to me and to us, I assumed that nobody knew. How could you know and not do anything? The more people I talked to, the more I learned, the more I realized a lot of people knew, and they kept their mouths shut. That includes then Father, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan, who lived and worked with Father Valentine over here in the rectory at Immaculata for 2 years, from the summer of '77 to the summer of 1979. Well, I'm telling you the story, let me just take you right there. So I don't know how much Father Dolan knew of what Valentine was doing during face-to-face confession in the back of the church. And basically you can see there's the church right there, and then you can just make out the cry room where Father Valentine would abuse me and others during face-to-face confession. I don't know how much Father Dolan, Monsignor Flavin knew or could have known about what Father Valentine was doing during face-to-face confession. What I do know is that in November 1977, I attended a pizza party where we ate pizza and played Risk here at the rectory, the Church of the Immaculata. In that room right there, that's the kitchen in Immaculata. I remember my mom. I remember my mom dropping me off right here. I remember her dropping me off and my being like right here and running around the car into the rectory to eat pizza and play Risk and, as it turns out, wrestle with Father Leroy Valentine. And the really difficult thing about that is that Monsignor Flavin and then Father Now Cardinal Timothy Dolan will be around in the rectory. And they would see things. I don't know how could they not see things, because this is, there were 3 men living here in the rectory at Immaculata, seeing what Father Valentine was doing to me and to us. So that all happened, and I kind of went on with my life. Long story short, I've got a painting that kind of explains this. I was abused in the context of the Eucharist. So some of my memories pertaining to my abuse are my favorite memories of my life. The time when I felt the most special, the most privileged. And special really is the right word. Special, 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 special. So up until 2002, I really had no idea. Well, I hadn't even given what happened to me, the memories that I did have, I didn't give them a second thought. In large part because anything that was abusey was connected to, this idea I call special training, where Father Leroy Valentine taught me something he shouldn't be teaching me, but he knew that he could trust me to keep my mouth shut about it because I was so special. And that, during special training, Father Leroy Valentine taught me the consecration prayer and gave me the power of consecrating bread into the literal body of Jesus Christ. Why didn't I say anything? Because Father Valentine told me not to say anything. So I just went on with my life. I had problems with the Catholic Church. I didn't understand what they were caused by, what they meant. I just knew that as I got back in St. Louis, things got a little more difficult. And it's hard enough for me. I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna sit in my car and try to get a little distance, especially as I talk about this stuff, which is the worst stuff, the Dolan stuff, the Spotlight stuff. And I'd had memories of fleeing, of bailing out of the rectory at Immaculata, but I didn't know what they meant. It's not like in Hollywood where you're having them every half an hour. It's not like iRobot where Will Smith is having flashbacks every half an hour. It's more like I would have them 15 times once a year, maybe at around the 4th of July, but there was no pattern to it. I didn't understand what was going on. And like I said, some of these were my favorite memories, the memories where I felt the most special. And that word special is a really important word. So 2002, the Spotlight articles drop. And basically the movie Spotlight, which won the Academy Award and I think the 2015 Academy Award, the movie Spotlight chronicles the writing of these 2 articles that became hundreds of articles, if not thousands of articles, about the Catholic sex abuse crisis in Boston. Those articles were released in January 2002. That then prompted the New York Times to start its own investigation of the Catholic Church. And for whatever reason, the New York Times, Lori Goodstein, Jody Wilgerin, ended up in St. Louis, writing an article called "Two Paths, No Easy Solution on Abusive Priests," that kind of compared and contrasted the handling of abuse and abusers in St. Louis and across the river in Belleville. And Belleville was headed up by the now Archbishop of Washington, D.C., the United States' own Bishop of Bling, Archbishop Gregory, Wilton Gregory. But in that New York Times article, so this is very early March 2002, maybe it's the 2nd or 3rd of March 2002, "Two Paths, No Easy Solution on Abusive Priests." That article named Father Leroy Valentine, my favorite priest, if not one of my favorite people from my childhood, as an abuser, and laid out allegations by 3 brothers, the Scorfina brothers. I didn't know what the hell to make of that because, like I said, Father Valentine was one of the most important people in my life. Such that when I was married in September of 93, at the suggestion of my mom, I actually contacted Father Leroy Valentine and asked if he would preside at my wedding. A conversation that went really weirdly because I said something to the effect of, this is my abuser, Father Leroy Valentine. And I started out the conversation with something to the effect of, you're a hard man to track down. Which I just meant as, I didn't have any memory of the abuse stuff or any understanding of the abuse stuff. I did have memories, but I didn't understand what they meant. So I started off that conversation with Father Leroy Valentine, which was very short and abrupt, and he basically said, I don't think that'd be a good idea. So then I just went on with my life. No big deal. It was my mom's idea. We needed a priest, and my mom suggested Father Valentine, and I gave him a call, and he said it wouldn't be a good idea. So I just went on with my life. But in early March 2002, Father Valentine is named as an abuser by the New York Times. 2 past, no easy solution on abusive priests. Laura Goodstein, Jody Wilgerin. And I didn't know what to make of that, what was said in that article, but it made me think about my memories and made me reevaluate my memories and try to understand what and if my memories meant anything. Which is how Father, then Bishop, at the time Bishop, now Cardinal Timothy Dolan re-enters the picture. So the New York Times piece ran on a Sunday. I think it was March 3rd, which was a Sunday. That got picked up in the St. Louis paper on that Monday, which got picked up by the news, like Channel 5 News on Tuesday. So Channel 5 News, I think on Tuesday would have been like the 5th or so of March 2002. And this is just weeks after Spotlight, after the original Spotlight articles ran about Boston. And I didn't know anything that was going on in Boston. I completely missed that, in part because of what I'll tell you. So that New York Times piece named Father Valentine. So on March, I think it's March 3rd, those articles run in the New York Times. That story gets picked up in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. It gets picked up by Channel 5. I think the story was done by a reporter named Ruth Ezell. I ended up contacting Ruth Ezell. She wanted to talk to me. She wanted to talk to me on camera. I wasn't comfortable doing that because I didn't know what my memories meant. And most of the memories that I had were, well, at the time they were positive, although with a parent's, from a parent's point of view, if a priest did that stuff with my kid, I would have freaked out. But, those memories were formed when I was a child and I didn't know any better. Reevaluating them, yes, they were creepy, but as a child, I didn't think they were creepy because we were taught that priests were kind of the manifestation of God on earth. So a priest could and would never do anything to harm a child. So I talked to the circuit attorney, Jennifer Joyce. I talked to her office. They never got back to me, I have to assume because of a statute of limitations problem. I talked to Ruth Ezell. I didn't want to go on camera because I didn't know what my memories meant. And I called the Archdiocese of St. Louis. And I got a call back probably March 5th or I think it was probably March 6th, 2002. I get a call back from the man who to me was father, but at the time he was bishop, auxiliary bishop, and now he's Cardinal Timothy Dolan. Hey Chris, Tim Dolan, Bishop Dolan. Been a long time, how you been? So I started this conversation with so I basically just asked Dylan, I'm like, have you heard all this stuff about Father Valentine? What the hell does it mean? Is it true? Could it be true? So then Bishop Dolan asked me, and he's Auxiliary Bishop Dolan. He'd been away, but he was back in St. Louis. So Bishop Dolan asked me, what do you remember? Remember, this is in the days and weeks after Spotlight, but I didn't have any memory of I didn't have any knowledge of Spotlight. I didn't know what was going on in Boston. I didn't have any kind of forewarning about there might be problems with the Catholic Church. I don't think I had any memory of that. I don't think I had any knowledge of that. So I wasn't clued into, okay, the Catholic Church has got a problem. That didn't register with me. That hadn't been covered. I don't think the Spotlight story had been covered in St. Louis and wouldn't be covered in St. Louis until after my Spotlight, which is Father Leroy Valentine. I think what happened is that basically the Leroy Valentine stuff started the Spotlight stuff in St. Louis. But I had no warning, no understanding, no sense that there was a problem in and with the Catholic Church up to that moment. I think that's, all right, why didn't I say more? Because I don't think I knew what the hell was going on. So the New York Times article, early March, March 3rd, 2002, the stuff about Father Valentine in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch on like March 4th, the KSDK article, March 5th, 2002, all caught me completely by surprise. So I called the Archdiocese. Cardinal Dolan called me back. I said, what the hell's going on? Is any of this stuff, could it be true? So then Auxiliary Bishop Dolan asked me, what do you remember? I told Dolan a set of 4 memories. I told him about face-to-face confession and the hugging and touching and stuff. It was really more about the hugging. I mean, Father Valentine was a huggy guy and was known for touching. I didn't know any better. In some ways, I was vulnerable because my dad at the time, I think, was trying to make partner. And he also went through this thing in his life where someone convinced my father that hugging boys was bad. So I was going through kind of this separating stage where I was getting older. And I think I needed hugs for reassurance. And my dad, for some reason, someone had told him that hugging boys was bad. It turned you gay or something. I don't know what the hell it was. But so my dad wasn't hugging me. So Father Valentine saw that, this is like 77. Father Valentine saw that as an opportunity to ingratiate himself with me and with other people. That was how Father Valentine got at people, starting through face-to-face confession, but then progressing into the rectory. So I told some of that to Father Dolan, or to Bishop, by then Auxiliary Bishop Dolan. And this is it's like March 6, 2002. So just days or weeks after Spotlight, after the publication, the Spotlight articles whose writing was chronicled by the movie Spotlight. I told Dolan about special training, although I didn't remember all the details. I didn't remember the Eucharist and everything. I just remember how Valentine would give me special training, how there was this special training kind of thing. I told Bishop Dolan about the Riskin Pizza Party from November 77. And then I told Bishop Dolan about the Mud Cave trip. And if you go to my website, chrisoleary.com/sins, you can see pictures from that Mud Cave trip with me with the guy in the flannel shirt and me with the guy in the number shirt. And so that picture was taken after we were in the Mud Cave. So I told Bishop Dolan about the Mud Cave trip, how that was a thing. And I did have one kind of slightly questionable / maybe negative memory from the Mud Cave trip, which is that, so on the way home in the station wagon, the white station wagon, I was riding shotgun with Father Valentine, who was driving. And I woke up from a nap with a start. I turned and I looked at Father Valentine, and he just looked disgusting to me. I was completely disgusted by him and afraid of and fearful. It was just this shame and disgust and fear all kind of mixed together. I didn't say this at the time. I didn't think this at the time, but I think what happened was that Father Valentine was molesting me while I was asleep. while I was napping next to him. You know, he's here and I'm right there, and he's touching me while he's driving. And he did something in it, or did it for long enough that it woke me up. And I woke up, looked at him, and was just disgusted by him, which a therapist at one point labeled a flash of insight. So I told that to Bishop Dolan, and he immediately, without any question or investigation, said, I was at the seminary with Leroy Valentine. We lived and worked together for 2 years at Immaculata. I know that he didn't do any of the things that he's accused of. I know there's no way that Leroy Valentine could have done anything to hurt a child. Period, blank, definitive, exclamation point. Which was good enough for me. Bishop freaking Dolan, who looked like he, at the time, was already on his way to becoming Cardinal freaking Dolan, which he became, had given me a clean bill of health, which I took as a clean bill of health, you know? Whew! Thank God that those memories don't mean anything. Thank God that doesn't mean anything. Yeah, this guy told this horrible story in the New York Times, but none of my memories mean anything. You know, Bishop Dolan told me my memories don't mean anything. Now, Dolan did offer me an appointment with a quote, what he described as a quote-unquote independent psychologist, who turned out to be the assistance coordinator for the Archdiocese of St. Louis, a woman named Nancy Brown. Not so independent. I did go and talk to her probably that next week, so this would be like, you know, like the 10th through the 5th, somewhere in the 10th to the 15th of March 2002. She also told me my memories didn't mean anything, and that I was just misinterpreting Father Valentine's actions or his intentions. And it's funny because misinterpreting is a word that a lot of survivors get. Misinterpreting is a word that's used directed towards a lot of survivors. So I just went on with my life. I'd been given a clean bill of health by Bishop freaking Dolan, now Cardinal freaking Dolan, by an independent psychologist named Nancy Brown. Sure, all the spotlight stuff was happening and was blowing up, but I had been given a clean bill of health. And then I got sick. February 2002 or 2005 or February 2003, my older son makes his first confession. I have a panic attack. February 2005, my older daughter makes her first confession. I have a panic attack. By summer 2005, I was trying to understand what the hell was going on. And I'd started seeing therapists and psychologists and everything starting in the summer of 2003, if not the summer of 2002. I remember meeting at the bread company in U City with my mom, because my now ex-wife had raised concerns, and everybody was concerned because something had happened to me in March 2002. Nobody knew what was happening, but I changed in March 2002, in the days and weeks following the spotlight. I got sick. Which culminated in my becoming like 10 years later, I learned that someone described me as having become catatonic at my job, such that I was laid off in June 2007, right before the 4th of July 2007, which is no coincidence because, you know, my abuse, the special training would happen right before the 4th of July, when my parents would go out of town to the ABA convention at the Greenbrier. That's when a lot of the worst stuff happened with Father Valentine. He would know that my parents would be out of town in the week before or of the 4th of July, and Father Valentine would call me up and I would serve a mass for him, and the special training would happen while my parents were out of town. And so, you know, summer of 2007, right before 4th of July, I got triggered. I became what someone later described to me as having become catatonic. I was laid off from a company that was acquired by Equifax, the credit bureau. And I've spent, you know, the next few years, well, I spent the next 10 years trying to get help from the Archdiocese of St. Louis, being being gaslighted and manipulated and lied to by the Archdiocese of St. Louis, just as the man I knew as father, who then became bishop, who's now Cardinal Timothy Dolan, lied to and manipulated and gaslighted me. And I say this not to bring him down, but to help try to hold him accountable. Cardinal Dolan has 1,000 priests under him in New York, and he's now running for Pope. And Cardinal Dolan earlier today, was feted by the people of Ireland, of Northern Ireland, in the city of Armagh, the Cathedral of Armagh. Cardinal Dolan was celebrated as the Irish boy done good, guy returning home. The man who, in the aftermath of Spotlight, lied to and manipulated and gaslighted me. The man who, in the aftermath of Spotlight, well, let me put it this way. When I was a child, I was sexually exploited, abused, and assaulted by a priest named Father Leroy Valentine. And then things got really bad. And then things got really bad part, that's Cardinal Dolan. That's what Cardinal Timothy Cardinal Dolan, did to me in early March 2002, in the aftermath of Spotlight, the release of the articles that the writing of which was chronicled in the movie Spotlight. And there's never been any accountability for what Cardinal Dolan did and did not do to me and to us as children in the late 1970s here at the Church of the Immaculata, abuse perpetrated by Father Leroy Valentine. I say this not to try to hurt the church, but really not out of hate for the church, but really out of love for the church, some lingering sense of love for the Catholic Church. All my friends are Catholics. I'm still a Christian. I'm actually a stronger Christian in some ways because I feel a sense of closeness to Jesus Christ as a result of what I've been subjected to and put through, in particular this, and then things got really bad stuff, which I have to believe largely were efforts to protect Cardinal Dolan, who saw and turned a blind eye to my and our sexual abuse as children, and who could be the next Pope. I find that unacceptable. I'm horribly triggered by Dolan's presence and being feted by the people of Ireland. And all I can do is tell the truth and try to expose Cardinal Timothy Dolan for who and what he is. He's a enabler, a blind-eyer of abuse. Cardinal Timothy Dolan saw and turned a blind eye to my and our sexual abuse as children, if not our sexual assault. I don't know whether Dolan witnessed any sexual assault, but I know that Timothy Cardinal Dolan, here at Immaculata, upstairs in the rectory at Immaculata, at least witnessed my and at least someone else's sexual exploitation, sexual abuse by Father Leroy Valentine. And then now Cardinal Timothy Dolan did nothing to intervene, to stop it, to prevent it. Instead, Timothy Cardinal Dolan kept his mouth shut and established himself as a loyal member of the Catholic Church, established his bona fides, for promotion into the hierarchy, for being made a cardinal, for being put on the path of a potential future pope. I find that unacceptable. I'm horribly triggered by what's going on in Ireland. I'm horribly triggered by the lack of accountability, and I'm here at Immaculata speaking up and speaking out, trying to protect and save the Catholic Church and the Christian faith from people like Timothy Cardinal Dolan.